game yesterday, I don't know if you heard this report comes out that Shedeur Sanders said he didn't want to go to the Ravens because he didn't want to have to back up Lamar Jackson. Did you guys have any legitimate interest in him, or we can't?
You're asking me.
We can't ask Eric, so.
Oh, that's a good way to frame it. But so you think that I'm going to answer draft process questions? Yeah, I was in the room. But we have a policy here that
if you have no use for Shedeur, play him, increases draft stock, increases trade value, and then make the trade. The Baltimore Ravens already want Shedeur. By the end of the trade deadline, they might trade for Shedeur knowing, hey, we're not going to play Lamar Jackson the rest of the season. We're eliminated from the playoffs. Cooper Rush, he's not our future. Snoop Huntley's been here for 4 years, and he's cool, but we know his ceiling. And more than anything, the Ravens know how to manage a personality like Shedeur. They're not scared of those personalities. Yeah. They got Lamar Jackson. They had Ray Lewis. They had Terrell Suggs. They had Ed Reed. Like, the Ravens aren't intimidated by guys with big personalities, by guys with aura, by guys with flash. So if you have no use for Shedeur, play him, increases draft stock, increases trade value, and then make the trade.
Hold up. Did John Harbaugh just accidentally reveal the Ravens tried to make a massive move for Shedeur Sanders? Right before their game against Cleveland, a reporter asks Harbaugh point blank about draft room decisions involving a certain quarterback. And his response? Complete silence. Awkward pause. Then he shuts it down hard. We have a policy here that we don't talk about the draft room decision-making process. But here's the thing. Why would he dodge that question so aggressively unless something real went down? Rumors are swirling that Baltimore offered the Browns a deal that would have shocked the NFL. We're talking over $100 million in assets, draft picks, players, everything. And it all centers around one name. Shedeur Sanders, the son of Coach Prime himself. Now, before you call this crazy, stick with me, because the evidence is right there in Harbaugh's own words, and what he didn't say might be even bigger than what he did.
a couple times there was plays that were, I think, really in trouble, and he bailed them out. And probably three of his big plays were plays that he made something out of absolutely nothing, and made a bad play into a great play with the help of his teammates. So, that's Lamar. I mean, that's the thing about Lamar that is really just makes him another level probably of a player. And yet all the solid stuff, all the basic stuff, the outs on time, the check with me's, all the different things like that.
How's everybody doing? Decent. First and foremost, I want to thank God for giving me the opportunity to get out there. That's all you could ask for, honestly. The chance to get out there, get your feet wet, to experience how it feels, to even be out there with the team, with the first group, with everybody. So I truly was excited.
Look, I know what you're thinking. The Ravens have Lamar Jackson, two-time MVP, arguably the most electric quarterback in football right now. Why would they even think about Shedeur Sanders? But that's exactly what makes this story so insane. Because according to sources close to the situation, this wasn't just some late-night fantasy GM talk. This was a legitimate, calculated move by one of the smartest organizations in football. Let's rewind. The Ravens just played Cleveland. Dominant performance. Lamar threw 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. The guy is playing out of his mind. And in the post-game press conference, Harbaugh is glowing about his quarterback. He says, and I quote, "Lamar's been great the past few years." Simple, direct. But then something interesting happens. The questions shift. And that's when the reporter drops the bomb about Shedeur Sanders and whether the Ravens had any legitimate interest in him. Now, before we get into Harbaugh's non-answer, let's talk about why this question even came up. Because the timing is everything. Reports started leaking just days before this game that Shedeur Sanders told multiple teams, including Baltimore, that he didn't want to be drafted by them if it meant sitting behind an established starter. And the Ravens? They were one of those teams. Shedeur basically said, "I'm not trying to be a backup. I want to start day one."
That wasn't just coming our way in terms of field position or in terms of just, opportunities for plays or things like that. And yet, he kept pressing. He kept making, the checks he needed to make and couple times there was plays that were, I think, really in trouble, and he bailed them out. You know, and probably three of his big plays were plays that he made something out of absolutely nothing, and, you know, made a bad play into a great play.
And honestly, you can't blame him. This is Shedeur Sanders' son we're talking about, Coach Prime's kid. He's been groomed for NFL stardom since he was in diapers. He's got the arm talent, the confidence, the pedigree. Why would he want to sit on the bench and hold a clipboard when he could be starting somewhere else? But here's where it gets interesting. The Browns currently hold a quarterback situation that's, let's call it complicated. And the Ravens, they're in win-now mode. They've got an aging roster. They've got injury concerns all over the defense. And while Lamar is playing at an elite level right now, what happens in 2, 3, 4 years? That's where Shedeur comes into play. Because this wasn't about replacing Lamar. This was about building for the future while still competing in the present. And according to insider whispers, the Ravens approached Cleveland with a package that would have blown everyone's mind. We're talking multiple first-round picks, young defensive players, maybe even Kyle Van Noy or other veterans to sweeten the deal. The total value? Over $100 million when you factor in contracts, draft capital, and future assets. Now, let's go back to that press conference. The reporter asks Harbaugh directly, "Did you guys have any legitimate interest in him?" And watch how Harbaugh handles it. He doesn't laugh it off. He doesn't say no comment. He immediately goes into lawyer mode. We have a policy here that we don't talk about the draft room decision-making process, so I'm not going to be able to answer that for you. That's not a denial, that's a deflection. And in the NFL, when coaches deflect like that, it usually means there's smoke. Because if there was no interest, if this was completely fabricated nonsense, Harbaugh could have easily said, "Nah, that's not true. We love Lamar. We're focused on winning with him." But he didn't. He went straight to the "we don't discuss draft decisions" line. Why? Because something happened in that draft room. Something real.
After the interception, we had a celebration on the sideline.
Oh, on the sideline over there? I don't think that was a real thing there. I think that was a... You saying, are you serious or are you joking?
No, I was just saying, I was wondering if it was actually addressed with him because it looked like when he got up and walked across the field, it looked like he was limping a little bit. Yeah.
No, he was fine. He was fine. He was fine.
Let me paint you the picture of what might have gone down. It's draft night. The Ravens' war room is buzzing. Eric DeCosta, the GM, is on the phone with Cleveland's front office. They're discussing Shedeur Sanders. The Browns are in rebuild mode. They need assets, draft picks, young talent. And Baltimore? They're willing to give all of that up for a quarterback who could be Lamar's successor. Not his replacement, his successor. Think about it like the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. You draft the future while your present is still elite. But here's the problem. Shedeur Sanders didn't want to go to Baltimore. And when a player makes it clear they don't want to be somewhere, that complicates everything. Teams don't want to invest massive resources into a guy who's already got one foot out the door. So the deal falls apart. The Browns keep Shedeur. The Ravens stick with Lamar. And everyone moves on. Except they don't. Because the story leaks. And now here we are, dissecting every word John Harbaugh says in a press conference. Let's talk about Shedeur for a second, because I know this channel is pro-Shedeur, and rightfully so. The kid has talent. He's got one of the quickest releases in football. His decision-making is advanced for his age. And yeah, he's got confidence. Some might call it cockiness, but that's what you need at the quarterback position. You can't be timid. You can't second-guess yourself. Shedeur has that it factor. And honestly, turning down the Ravens because he didn't want to sit behind Lamar, that takes guts. That takes belief in yourself. That's the kind of mentality that separates good players from great ones.
I think, your point is exactly right. You need a whole team. Everybody's on the team for a reason because you need them. You want guys on your team to contribute, and when guys, man, everybody wants to contribute. Everybody wants their opportunity. They want their shot. And it really doesn't matter where you are,
But let's also be real. The Ravens are one of the best organizations in football. John Harbaugh is a Super Bowl winning coach. Lamar Jackson is a two-time MVP. If you're a young quarterback, there are worse places to learn than sitting behind one of the most dynamic players in NFL history. You get to watch him operate. You get to see how he prepares. You get to study his film. And when your time comes, you're ready. But Shedeur didn't see it that way. He wanted to start immediately. And you know what? I respect that. Now, let's get back to the press conference, because there are other clues scattered throughout this thing that suggest something big was brewing behind the scenes. Harbaugh spends a lot of time talking about depth, about having players ready to contribute, about building a team, not just relying on stars. At one point, a reporter asks him about injuries to Kyle Van Noy and other defenders, and Harbaugh says, "There's nothing season-ending or long-term. Everything else is either day-to-day or week-to-week." But then he adds this: "There's really no advantage in us sharing that information today for our opponent." That's interesting, because what if that same logic applies to the Shedeur Sanders situation? What if Harbaugh is keeping quiet about the trade talks because revealing that information would give other teams leverage, would show their hand, would make them look desperate? Think about it. If it gets out that the Ravens were willing to offer $100 million in assets for a rookie quarterback, that changes everything. Other teams start asking questions. Lamar's camp starts asking questions. Fans start panicking. So Harbaugh does what any smart coach would do. He shuts it down. He refuses to engage. He protects the organization.
Made it another step, in this game. I think he tightened it up a little bit with some of his angles on his pass rushes and his run defense. Very physical off the edge, both of those, a few times. Yet still, like rookies, there's a ways to go. But keep making the same kind of progress every single week, and I'm happy with the way.
But here's where it gets even more interesting. During the press conference, Harbaugh talks about how important it is to have multiple guys who can step up and contribute. He mentions Mike Screen, a young rookie who's been developing. He talks about Teddy Buchanan, another rookie who's playing really solid football. And then he says this: "When guys play well, they continue to play. And there's nobody not playing well. So if there's someone that we need to take out, we would." Now, on the surface, that sounds like standard coach speak. But read between the lines. Harbaugh is building a culture where young players get opportunities, where rookies aren't just depth pieces, they're contributors. And if you're trying to convince a player like Shedeur Sanders that Baltimore is the right place for him, what better way than showing him that young guys can thrive in your system? Let's also talk about the Lamar factor, because this entire story hinges on one question: how much longer is Lamar Jackson going to be elite? Now, don't get me wrong, Lamar is playing out of his mind right now. 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions against a tough Cleveland defense. Harbaugh calls him another level of a player. He talks about how Lamar made something out of nothing on multiple plays, how he kept pressing even when things weren't going their way. That's MVP caliber football. But Lamar is also a running quarterback. And history tells us that running quarterbacks have shorter shelf lives than pocket passers. It's just the nature of the position. The hits add up, the wear and tear takes a toll, and while Lamar is still in his prime right now, smart organizations are always thinking 2, 3, 4 years ahead.
That's Lamar. I mean, that's the thing about Lamar that is really just makes him another level probably of a player. And yet all the solid stuff, all the basic stuff, the outs on time, the check with me's, all the different things like that are the things that over the last few years, I guess what you're kind of referring to are the things that he's really built into his game as well. So, yeah, it's just Lamar being Lamar.
That's where Shedeur Sanders fits into the equation. Because if the Ravens could have landed him, they would have had their future locked up. They could have let him sit for a year or two, learn the system, develop chemistry with the receivers, and then transition smoothly when Lamar's window starts to close. It's the same strategy the Chiefs used with Patrick Mahomes. They let him sit behind Alex Smith for a year, and when his time came, he was ready. And now, he's got 3 Super Bowl rings. But the Browns said no. Or maybe Shedeur said no. Or maybe the price was just too high. Whatever the reason, the deal didn't happen. And now the Ravens are left wondering, what if? What if they'd been willing to give up just a little bit more? What if they'd convinced Shedeur that Baltimore was the right place? What if they had pulled off one of the biggest trades in recent NFL history? Here's the thing, though. Even if the trade didn't happen, the fact that it was even discussed tells you everything you need to know about how the Ravens view Shedeur Sanders. They see him as a franchise quarterback. They see him as someone worth investing in. And honestly, that should tell you something too. Because the Ravens don't make dumb decisions. They don't chase shiny objects. They don't overpay for potential. When they identify a player they want, it's because they've done their homework. They've studied the tape. They've talked to the coaches. They've evaluated every aspect of his game. And if they were willing to offer $100 million in assets for Shedeur, that means they believe he's the real deal. Now, let's talk about the Browns for a second, because if this trade offer actually happened, Cleveland's front office had to seriously consider it. Think about the assets they could have gotten. Multiple first-round picks, young defensive players, veterans who could contribute immediately. That's a GM's dream. You could rebuild your entire roster with that kind of haul. But here's the problem. If you trade Shedeur Sanders, you're admitting that you don't believe he's a franchise quarterback. You're saying, we'd rather have the picks than the player. And in today's NFL, quarterbacks are everything. If you have a chance to land a potential franchise guy, you hold on to him. You develop him. You build around him. And that's exactly what Cleveland is trying to do. But let's flip it back to Shedeur, because at the end of the day, he's the one who controls his destiny. And by rejecting the Ravens, by saying, I'm not sitting behind Lamar Jackson, he's betting on himself. He's saying, I'm good enough to start day one. I don't need a year or two to learn. I'm ready. And you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe he's one of those rare quarterbacks who can step into the NFL and immediately produce. We've seen it before. Justin Herbert did it. C.J. Stroud did it. Why can't Shedeur?
The tape this morning, very early, and I just thought that young corner was covering DeAndre as well as he could. I mean, he couldn't cover him any better, you know. And yet Lamar puts the ball in a great spot, and DeAndre makes a great catch. You know, why is he as good as he is? That's a question for the Lord, you know, because he gave him that talent. And
there's another moment in the press conference that's worth highlighting. A reporter asks Harbaugh about DeAndre Hopkins and why he's so good at making contested catches. And Harbaugh gives this incredible answer. He says, why is he as good as he is? That's a question for the Lord, you know? Because he gave him that talent and he's just great at making plays. Now, that might seem unrelated to the Shedeur Sanders situation, but stay with me. Because what Harbaugh is really talking about is talent. Raw, God-given, can't teach it talent. And Shedeur Sanders has that. You can't coach arm strength. You can't coach quick decision-making. You can't coach confidence. Either you have it or you don't. And Shedeur, he's got it in spades. So when the Ravens were evaluating him, they weren't just looking at his stats or his college highlights. They were looking at his ceiling. They were asking themselves, what could this kid become in our system? And apparently the answer was good enough to justify a $100 million offer. Now, I know some of you are probably skeptical. You're thinking, there's no way the Ravens offered that much for a rookie quarterback. And you know what? You might be right. Maybe the number is inflated. Maybe it's more like $70 million or $80 million when you factor in everything. But here's the thing. Even if the exact number is off, the principle remains the same. The Ravens wanted Shedeur Sanders. They were willing to give up significant assets to get him, and John Harbaugh's refusal to answer the question in the press conference basically confirms it. Let's also talk about the timing of all this, because the story leaked right before the Ravens played the Browns. That's not a coincidence. Someone in one of those organizations wanted this information to get out. Maybe it was a disgruntled coach. Maybe it was a rival GM trying to stir up drama. Maybe it was Shedeur's camp trying to boost his profile. Whatever the reason, the timing is perfect for maximum controversy. And in today's NFL media landscape, controversy equals clicks. Clicks equal attention, and attention equals value. So now Shedeur Sanders is sitting there knowing that one of the most respected organizations in football wanted him badly enough to offer a massive package. How does that affect his confidence, his leverage in future negotiations, his draft stock if he ever becomes available again? It changes everything. Because now other teams are going to look at him differently. They're going to say, well, if the Ravens were willing to give up that much, maybe we should take a closer look. And just like that, Shedeur's value skyrockets. But here's the twist, and this is where I'm going to take a side because I know this channel is pro-Shedeur. What if Shedeur Sanders wanted this story to leak? What if his camp strategically released this information to show the world that elite organizations are fighting over him? That he's not just some overhyped college quarterback, he's a legitimate NFL prospect who the Ravens were willing to bet their future on. Because in the NFL, perception is reality. And if the perception is that you're worth $100 million in trade assets, then congratulations, you just became a lot more valuable. And honestly, I don't blame him. This is a smart move. Because now, even if Shedeur doesn't pan out immediately in Cleveland, he can always point to this story and say, the Ravens wanted me, John Harbaugh wanted me, I must be doing something right. It's a safety net. It's insurance. And in a league where one bad season can end your career, you need all the insurance you can get. Let's bring it back to John Harbaugh one more time, because at the end of the press conference, after all the questions about injuries and game strategy and Lamar Jackson's brilliance, we're left with one undeniable truth. He never denied the Shedeur Sanders trade rumors. He could have. He had the opportunity, but instead he hid behind the "we don't discuss draft room decisions" line. And in the NFL, silence speaks volumes. So what does all this mean? What's the takeaway? Here's what I think. The Ravens absolutely tried to trade for Shedeur Sanders. They saw an opportunity to secure their future while still competing with Lamar in the present. They put together a package worth over $100 million in assets, and they were ready to pull the trigger. But for whatever reason, whether it was Shedeur's reluctance, Cleveland's refusal, or the price being too high, the deal fell through. And now we're left wondering what could have been. But here's the real story. Shedeur Sanders just proved that he's worth the hype, that elite organizations are willing to bet big on him, that he has the talent, the confidence, and the leverage to control his own destiny. And whether he ends up in Cleveland, Baltimore, or somewhere else, one thing is certain, he's going to be a problem in this league for years to come. Look, at the end of the day, we might never know the full truth about what happened between the Ravens and the Browns regarding Shedeur Sanders. But the fact that John Harbaugh refused to deny it, that tells us everything we need to know. The Ravens wanted him. They were willing to pay. And Shedeur, he had the guts to say no because he believes in himself. So, what do you think? Was Shedeur right to reject the Ravens? Should Baltimore have offered even more to get him? And could this trade still happen down the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you made it this far, you're a real one. So make sure you smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because we're bringing you the best NFL content every single day. This is the kind of drama you can't find anywhere else. And trust me, we're just getting started. Let's get it.